So many anniversaries over the last couple of days that I'd like to spend time on, but don't have that time. It was on this day that the Winter Palace was stormed, triggering the Bolshevik Revolution, which led to the establishment of the USSR, the Soviet Union, now 30 years dead, but lamented by 75% of the Russian people. It's official in the latest Western poll on the matter. It was the very day, that the late and great Leonard Cohen passed from this earth, a man of great beauty, lyrical beauty, and a beauty of character not often seen in the music business. ABBA outsold him, no doubt, but we'll be talking about them later in the show. It's the anniversary, or the 5th of November was, when Captain Bob Robert Maxwell, MC, the erstwhile publisher of a whole slew of British newspapers. If he'd been alive today, he'd have had a television station or two also. Went into the drink in the Mediterranean and inadvertently made me very, very rich. I had accused him, under privilege in the House of Commons, of a whole series of very serious matters. He immediately assailed me on the front page of every one of his newspapers, all of them singing from the same hymn sheet. I issued proceedings. He was ready to defend those proceedings. But when he fell, or was he pushed off the back of his luxury yacht, the hopes of his newspapers of defending my libel action slipped under the waves with him. I'm still driving the luxury car that those libel damages afforded me, and for a time I lived in a house, a whole wing of which had been bought for me by Captain Robert Maxwell's newspapers. And I mentioned earlier about social media. It's a thing. It's an important thing. We'll be talking to the founder of Getter, a man who used to be a senior advisor to Donald Trump, about the nexus of social media and politics. Earlier this week, the more inquiring amongst you on Twitter already know, I and my children were threatened with death, a bloody and heinous death, by a Twitter account apparently opened for the purpose of delivering that threat. I'm on the trail of the person, so are the police, so are others who will have to remain unnamed for the moment. We intend to track down this man, a rather out of the ordinary threat, threatening not just me but my children, even dropping an emoji of a teddy bear at the end of his threat against them. It turns out that the man had opened 2 Twitter accounts in October, following only one account, mine. But he opened a third in November, which only ever issued one tweet, which was a threat to kill me, but with special algorithm evading techniques built into the tweet. After a day, Twitter took it down. I'm suing Twitter in Dublin, where they are headquartered, amongst other things, demanding the immediate handing over of the internet address, the IP address of that account, so that at least I know whether the person involved is my neighbor or someone more far-flung. I mention neighbor because the name of the threatening account was Aidan Foster, spelled A-I-D-E-N. When I Googled the unusual spelling of that name, I discovered that the only person that comes up is the star of the Australian soap opera series Neighbours. Was that supposed to make me think that the man that's threatening to kill me lives nearby? Or was it a reference to Russia's neighbors? Who knows? But we intend to find out. It's been a week. We still have not heard from Twitter. We've only now heard from the police in Scotland, where I live, who are doing a very good job. But the Metropolitan Police took several days, not hours, to pass them the necessary paperwork to task them to carry out the investigation. So much for lessons must be learned from the stabbing to death by a blade wielded allegedly by an Islamist fanatic, which murdered my erstwhile parliamentary colleague David Amos a couple of weeks ago. Social media is not living up to the expectations of the public or of the lawmakers. The lawmakers have different axes to grind than someone like me. The lawmakers want to close down social media because that's the only part of the media that holds politicians to account, holds governments to account. I want lawbreakers, people threatening others with death, to be promptly handed over to the police. I'm not against anonymous Twitter accounts, but their actual identity must be verifiably known to the social media platform which is allowing them to write whatever they like on their platform, so that if what it is that they like constitutes a crime, then that criminal's details can be handed promptly to the victim and to the authorities. I'll be discussing these matters with the former advisor to Donald Trump, the man behind Getter, a social media account that might have some chance of escaping the shackles that the liberal owners of Twitter and of Facebook, of YouTube and Instagram, by the way, Instagram's back online, welcome to you, of the liberal shackles that put Donald Trump, then the President of the United States of America, off their platforms into social media oblivion. Is Trump going to use social media to make his comeback? He'd win, according to the latest poll, a presidential race which is coming up in 2024 by a massive 8 percentage points. As predicted last week here by Garland Nixon, the Democrats lost catastrophically the governorship of Virginia in what might be a harbinger of midterm election defeats yet to come for the Democrats. Joe Biden is at record low levels of popularity, and Kamala Harris is even less popular than him. So in the unfortunate event of Joe Biden's bath chair running over a cliff whilst being pushed for a perambulation by Kamala Harris, the Democrats would be even worse off than they are under the leadership of Joe Biden. These are important issues. The question of the media is also thrown into very sharp relief. Tonight I can tell you that my next film, my next documentary film, working title 000, How the British Stole an American Presidency, is now underway. I'm writing it, I'll be producing it, I won't be presenting it, and I won't be directing it, but I will be crowdfunding for it on January the 1st of next year. It'll be a bigger budget than normal because filming will have to be done in Britain, in the United States, and in Russia. It refers, of course, to the theft of Donald Trump's first, maybe only, but certainly first presidency by the Russiagate hoax, which tonight lies in absolute tatters. all those flunkies in the FBI, in the British security services, just next door to me, whose factotum, Steele, put together a dossier of dross, even worse dross than Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair's dross dossier, put together by some of the same people, was used to effectively hijack the entire presidency of the United States of America. Not since Britain burned down the White House have the British interfered in American politics like they did with the Russiagate hoax. The key witness who told Steele what Steele, paid by Hillary Clinton, told the American public and political class, has now announced that he was lying, that he had no Russian sources, that the things he said were in a videotape supposedly in the hands of the Russians, where Donald Trump was in a hotel room and a gaggle of leggy Russian blondes got so excited to be in his company that they wet themselves. It was all a lie. P-gate was a lie. Russian collusion in the election of Trump was a lie. No one can now dispute it. In fact, the flunkies and the factotums ought to be the least embarrassed parties to this picture, because the real villains of the Russiagate hoax picture are the liberal media that swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. It's a truism in my life, I've discovered it, that if something sounds too good to be true, that's probably because it isn't true. The story about Trump being an agent of Russia who would end up behind bars, some even predicted in front of a firing squad for treason, was all a lie. The story that Trump was in the pay of the Russians turned out to be a lie. And we now know from the testimony of the chief source of the Steele dossier that it was a lie gobbled up with great gusto, adopted with relish by the likes of MSNBC and Rachel Maddow in particular, but by CNN, by the Washington Post, by the New York Times, by the entire plethora of liberal media outlets in the United States, which ended up effectively rendering the first term of Donald Trump's presidency null and void. Now, I say to you what I said on the day that Trump was elected. I'm not happy that Donald Trump is the president of the United States of America, but I'm very happy that Hillary Clinton isn't. And that remains my view. It will remain my view come the next presidential election. But what I will not remain silent about is a policy, a hoax, which led to the pushing of Trump down every avenue that he should not have gone down, just to prove that he was not an agent of the Russians, that Putin didn't own him. Maddow said on television that Trump would remove American forces from Russia's borders. So he should, but he didn't. In fact, he redoubled them. Maddow and the others said that Trump would pull back from the foreign wars as he had promised to do in the presidential election, but he didn't. he redoubled America's involvement in the war on Yemen, in the war on Syria, in the war on Libya. He redoubled he compounded every blunder made by the Obama presidency, not the least of which was almost taking us into a war with Iran and taking actions like the assassination of General Soleimani that plunged the world deeper into the crisis that exists between the West and the Muslim world. I blame the media for that. I expect Hillary Clinton, a rotten, twisting crook, a key member of the Clinton crime family. I expect them to behave like the political mafia that they are. I believe and expect that someone like Steele, a superannuated spook from next door, or maybe across the river right in front of me, will behave as he did behave. Scorpions sting, after all, because they are scorpions. But if their effluent had not been adopted with relish by the American liberal media, echoed, of course, by their chorus line in London, in The Guardian, in the BBC, then the Trump presidency would have been different. And lastly, although my name is George, I don't believe that Britain has any business in the government of the United States of America. And the fact that Britain, not Russia, but Britain, was the foreign power interfering in the American presidential election, it's going to make a cracking film, I think. That's why I'm calling it 000, because there was nothing to it in the end. Fasten your seatbelts. It's the mother of all talk shows.